pray. Father, thank you today for your grace. Thank you that you, in Jesus, have provided us. Again today, we have the utter and total confidence that we are accepted in your sight, even as we confess with open hearts and fully accept that before you we have absolutely in ourselves no right to come before you. We come before you with boldness because of Jesus. Thank you today that we are in him. Thank you today that we are united with him and all of the blessings that means because of that extraordinary. And so we're praying together you will help us to view ourselves in that reality as we truly are, in union with Christ, and to not establish in our own minds a sense of self-identity, self-worth, self-righteousness that comes because of us, but to truly view ourselves in terms of him. Thank you for Dr. Ward's time to come in here early morning and to jump in here and give us time. And we very much thank you for the time that we have as brothers to be able to talk about these things, to discuss your word, and just to grow in our ability to study your word and to communicate it. And I pray that you would bless the next 2 hours as we work together. Pray that you would give Dr. Ward strength and help for the remainder of the workday, and continue to bless him in the work that he's doing, and each of the others here in our various ministries and the work that we have in different parts of the world. So we're committing this time to you, and we're looking forward to what you will do. We ask it in your son's name. Amen. So in terms of introducing Dr. Ward, we've met him before. He helped us out quite a bit in advanced hermeneutics. And then if you've just been watching different things, he has released a book here recently that you need to read. So Authorized the Use and Misuse of the King James Version. And this is not a setup. Actually, ironically, earlier today I was working on a review that we'll be going through. It's one of the reviews that goes up on Bring the Books for Frontline. But just working back through the book again was fun, because I read it a couple of months ago, and then time had faded and stuff like that. But it's just a very well written book. It's very ironic, so you're definitely it's not like a King James tear up book, where you're going to go through and here's all the passages they got it wrong. It's very respectful, and just he makes the commitment early on. I'm not going to criticize the translation. It's just change of time. It's just the language has changed. So anyway, yeah, it's a very good book. And then there's also actually a video, I wouldn't say a video version of the book, but there's also a documentary that talks through some of the same content. So either way, it's a very good way, I think, to help people. It's kind of my go-to book if I'm thinking of how to help somebody on this issue. It's the book to give them. So I highly recommend that. And then today, we've asked him to talk about Logos Bible software, as well as writing in general, the publishing process in general. He works for Logos. You'll see his blog posts and his other content regularly going up through that medium, or through Logos. So there's a lot of things that you can benefit from his ministry and other places where he's put his content up. And with that, I turn the time over. We want to use his time. We want to hear from him. So thank you again for being here. And as we go with the time here, the idea is if you have questions or discussion, we're viewing this more as like a seminar than a lecture. So if you have content or things that you're wanting to know about, questions, and let's bring those up and let's discuss those as we go. Okay.
And Joel, let me clarify before I get started. I've got 2 hours with a break in the middle.
That's it.
That we're talking about. Okay, great. I can eat breakfast during the break. That's man. Okay.
We can extend the break a little bit so you can get a good breakfast.
Well, I figured I would spend the first hour talking about writing and publishing, and the second hour talking about Logos. And if the first hour spills into the second because we have some good discussion, then that would be really wonderful for me. And I brought a little object lesson. This is A Theology of the New Testament by George Eldon Ladd. And it's a nice big thick book. Erdman's, I want to say, yep, almost 800 pages. And I wish I could say I've read the entire thing. I haven't, but I'm familiar with Ladd's contributions, and they're really significant. If any of us writes a book that still gets talked about in 50 years, that is a major contribution by definition. And yet the second book I was holding up is called A Place at the Table, and it is a biography of George Eldon Ladd. The subtitle is George Eldon Ladd and the Rehabilitation of Evangelical Scholarship in America. Ladd was part of a renaissance of evangelical scholarship in the mid-20th century in America, and he really was incredibly bright, well-trained, along with a number of others who helped get Fuller Seminary off the ground. He was publishing and presenting and engaging in the scholarly conversation in biblical studies in a way that evangelicals hadn't backed fully away from ever, but there had been a nadir of evangelical influence, and Ladd was part of, as I said, the Renaissance. But the reason I own this book, A Place at the Table, is because of the poignancy and sadness of the title, and therefore the point of his narrative, which is that he sold, I mean, really the book shows clearly he sold his integrity to getting a place at the table with people who didn't love the Lord at all. So people who didn't believe the Bible at all. What really sent him to drink, literally to alcoholism and to an earlier death than necessary, was a bad review of his magnum opus by a major secular scholar. And I knew that was the basic storyline, but I wanted to kind of drill it down into my soul, because I've always felt in myself some of the same ambition that he had. And I think there's a book I also haven't read, along with, the great majority of books I have not read. Join the club, right? And in this other book, Rescuing Ambition, just the title I've thought about for years, and I read a couple reviews. I don't think ambition is wrong. Attempt great things for God, expect great things from God is a famous missiological phrase. And I always felt something of a burden to do something for the kingdom of God. And I don't think that is wrong. But I've wanted to make absolutely certain over the years that what my heart was really after in any writing ministry that I might have was not prominence for myself, or even a place at the table. I really felt like that's something God has to give me or not. And as we go on, I'll make clear why I say this. I don't think I really have a place at the table, certainly not at the table that George Eldon Ladd was going for. I don't have any influence in secular scholarship and biblical studies, and it doesn't bother me. That's not been my ambition. Instead, my ambition, positively speaking, is guided by Ephesians 4. And I will pull it up in Logos Bible software. I've always been guided by Ephesians 4 because I grew up in a King James only tradition. And actually, I had a good experience. I had good, godly Christian school teachers, but they were skeptical in general about ministerial education. And so I went into ministerial education starting as a junior in college when I switched from graphic design to Bible, switched my major. I went in with some need to justify to myself and my conscience, why am I spending so much time studying when the world is dying and going to hell today? And I found that justification in Ephesians 4. Christ has ascended, and he gives these gifts to his church. Verse 11, he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers. And I had seen this in my real life. I went to the same church Joel did for many years. I was there for 18 years. And my shepherd was a teacher. And I saw that what Ephesians 4:12, the next verse, describes is exactly what he did. It says that he gave these apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. And though, sadly, I've seen many defections from the good teaching that I received, people who've apostatized, who have divorced their wives or husbands, people who sat under the same teaching I did and were not, or were tossed to and fro. Nonetheless, even God brought up children who rebelled against him. The upshot, the great majority of the people who brought an open heart to that kind of shepherding and teaching that I experienced were equipped for ministry, were built up as the body of Christ. They did attain the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God. They attained maturity, and who of us can say we attained the fullness of Christ? But people who sat under that good teaching were not tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine. That's the justification for what you're doing now for studying in the Asia Center for Advanced Christian Studies. That's the justification for you reading a book instead of handing out tracts. Practically speaking, the Bible doesn't specify a number of years of education that's necessary, but you must have recognized that there's a difference in the ability that someone has with the word when they've taken the extra time to get education of whatever sort the Lord makes available. I don't blame people who don't have that available, but nowadays everybody with a smartphone, and that's a lot of people in this world, have good teaching available freely in ways that were unimaginable even let alone 50 years ago. So the responsibility level of people in the world to handle the text responsibly is going up. At the same time, I was listening to excellent expository preaching from my pastor. I will say this one critical word, not of him, but of the milieu in which I was. I also did hear many sermons from visiting preachers in college and in seminary, which did not handle the word carefully. And one of the reasons that didn't drive me to frustration and make me say, I'm out of here. In fact, I stuck around for as much education as they would give me. One of the reasons was I had a model in my pastor. That's what we're going for. And I saw other messages that didn't handle the text accurately as misrepresenting what our group was going for. The model was always clear to me, but the effect of hearing a lot of messages that were not careful with the text of Scripture was to give me a holy fear of ever doing that myself. I wanted to be absolutely certain, as much as a man can be, and I'm limited and I'm fallen and finite. So I'm sure I say things that are not right. But as much as I can before God, I want to be able to say, thus saith the Lord, and know that what I was saying was what the text was saying. Otherwise, I have no justification for being in front of people. So the things that drive a preacher, which is, I'm guessing, what most of us do with most of our time, though not all of us, and I really could be wrong there, and some of you are called, I know, to more academic ministries, some of you more to pastoral ministries. Still, we're doing the same thing. We are representing God through teaching of his word to his people. And it's Ephesians 4 that drives me. And I've gone back to it over and over and over again. Thankfully, in the communities that I've been in for now a good many years, I don't have to justify the extra education that I've received. Um, Mostly people are thankful for the extra level of care that I, and actually my own pastor, who's also, done a lot of extra seminary work, that we're able to bring to the church. But I'm also held back by the bad models that I've seen kind of on both sides. People who aren't careful with the text of Scripture, and people who are careful with it but had the wrong ambition. And I think Ladd was regenerated, and I think he's nodding up in heaven if he's at all aware that I'm talking about his story right now. I think he would agree that he made shipwreck of his life by an ambition that wasn't right. But my specific brief here this morning is not to talk about preaching or teaching the Bible more generally, but about a writing and publishing ministry. And let me turn to that now. I got into writing and publishing in the way that I think you ought to get into it if you do. And I got into it through the calling that consists of gifting and desire. I imagine there must be times when you're called to something that goes against your desires, but it's hard for me to imagine a successful writer who is dragged into it kicking and screaming. I have one friend who went through the PhD program with me, and he said, writing for me is like pulling teeth. And I felt like, if you don't know that expression, it just means it's a terrible pain, no anesthesia, and they're yanking these out. Every word is another tooth. Well, boy, my life would be miserable if writing were like that. That says to me, no problem, you're not called because you're not gifted. You don't like this. You don't have any desire for it. It's fine. You don't have to write. You don't have to publish. Not everybody does. And there's a certain ministry of writing and publishing that I'm called to, maybe one that you're called to, and there are others that I'm not called to. Totally fine. God's allowed to send his generals and his soldiers where he wants in the battle. But I sensed in myself many years ago a love for and a delight in writing English. And that was true in classes way back in high school. That was true in college. And I did realize, I've seen people say this many times, and it's totally true. It has been in my experience. Nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, you're a writer, and I'm going to help you be a writer. I'm going to get you to do it. You might have teachers who recognize some talent in you and give you encouragement, but they're not going to map out a career path or tell you exactly what to do and where to go. It's got to come out of your heart. You've got to first want to please the Lord and edify his people by writing about the Scripture. And then you've got to have, I assume, some level of desire to put pen to paper or the fingers to keyboard, and just get it out there. And I sensed that pretty strongly going into grad school. And nobody tapped me on the shoulder except in one subtle way. I was working at a research center at the library in grad school. That was my main job for 5 years. And I was reading articles and writing summaries of them. And I mean, what a dream job, because the articles were all about the religious world in America, theology, exegesis. It was just fantastic. I'm still just speechless that the Lord would give me this opportunity. And my boss was the former editorial supervisor at BJU Press. His name is Mark Sidwell. And when he would give scholarly papers every year at the Bible Faculty Summit, which hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about a little bit, he wanted them to be edited, but he had no means to do this. So he tapped me and asked me to edit his papers. And I could tell without him saying it, that that was his subtle way of saying, I think you have that spark. You can write. And I took that as a big encouragement. But then I also looked at the world of people who were writing at the time. This would have been like 2002, 2003. Blogging was just taking off. And I could tell there were people out there my age who, because they were young, were jumping into this new medium of blogging, something that our elders were not familiar with and therefore not skilled in. And I could tell they weren't ready. They were just chattering and filling the air with words that weren't really edifying to the church, weren't really building it up, weren't really careful. So I purposed in my heart, I'm going to wait until I feel like I actually have something to say that's worth hearing to the church before I start chattering. So I waited years. I probably waited about 5 years till about 2008 to launch my blog. That's when I was deep into the PhD program, almost done with it. I guess I was done with classes at that point. I was working on the dissertation, if I remember right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. And that's when I launched what is now By Faith We Understand. And that has been the major means by which I've been given writing opportunities. I've had others too, but that has kind of made a way for me. And I've been very grateful to the Lord for those opportunities. I wonder how many of you feel that desire that I would call gifting and calling. And I want to encourage you that if you do, you ought to fan that gift into flame, because the church does need writers. And I wanted to turn my attention to that a little bit, and specifically scholarly writing. Let me propose a small discussion topic here before I give my opinion on this. What is a scholar? Could you jump in the chat and tell me, how would you define what a scholar is? I won't pick on anybody. Joel Arnold, Bob Bell, one of our teachers, defined it one time as a guy who chooses to study when he has free time. And apparently Bob Bell used an emoji too. Okay, that works. What other definitions would you give? What is a scholar? I'm going to get some water while you define scholar. Okay, I'm going to skip Joel's other answer for now. Phil, somebody who studies as his profession or vocation. Kenneth, student who is at the cutting edge of his field of study. Denny, a man that is knowledgeable. And I won't stop anyone else from answering, but that's enough to start discussion. There are at least 2 strains here of answers, and I think they complement one another. Okay, Joel gives a Google definition: someone who gets regularly cited by other students and writers in his field. Great. Here's the 2 strains I see in the answers here, and it's just what I would expect. And I think both answers are right, and both are essential. The one strain is somebody who has expertise. So someone who's at the cutting edge, someone who studies as his profession and therefore naturally has expertise. Okay, so Andrew, one who studies deeply his word for the benefit of others and for his glory. Of course, that's a more Christian definition. And of course, I'm going to want to give a Christian definition of scholar. And then we're talking more about biblical scholarship, not just scholarship more generally. Okay, but the one strain is the personal expertise that somebody has, a man that is knowledgeable. a second strain, and one that I think is essential. And if you don't have this, you don't have a scholar. Even if you have personal expertise, you're not a scholar unless being at the cutting edge of your field means that you are being regularly cited. You are pushing forward the conversation. Okay. Now, that's scholarship more generally. And do I have Bible for that? Nope, no Bible. I am giving what I would say is an observation of general revelation. You know, the Bible doesn't use the word scholar, so I'm free to define it in a way that's useful for me. And in this case, I'd say, yeah, if you're going to merit that title, and by the way, I don't think I do. And this is why. I don't push forward the conversation. I'm not regularly cited by other students and writers in my field. I'm not just saying that for false humility. It's just observable. You know, actually now with electronic tools I have, is it ResearchGate or academia.edu? I think it's the latter. That is regularly sending me emails saying a certain number of papers cite Mark Ward. Well, my dad is Mark Ward Sr., and he's an active writer in the communications field. There are many Mark Wards. I highly doubt that any of those papers that's citing Mark Ward is citing me. So I don't claim the title scholar. And that's another one of those titles that if anyone gives it to you, I think you should resist it graciously if you have the opportunity, until it's overwhelming. That's a label you want others to give you and not for you to give yourself. A little tip here in publishing: if you achieve a doctorate, don't ever put Dr. So-and-so on the cover of your book. Now, I'm using American customs here. I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but in America, that's gauche, that's uncouth to put doctor in front of your name. Literally every time I've ever seen that, it's from a person who doesn't have a reliable or rigorous substantive doctorate. For example, I ran into a guy who teaches at a King James only college, and not only did he have a degree mill degree that he just paid money for and they gave him a THD, but when I saw the name of the institution that supposedly gave him this THD, I thought, I've never heard of them, and that's odd. I'm pretty sure I would have heard of any place that would give a King James only guy a THD. So I looked it up, and he had misspelled the name of the university that supposedly gave him this THD. So I'm saying you put yourself out there by trying to award yourself the title of doctor or scholar, and you're just going to make yourself look foolish. Maybe there is somebody here who has that gifting and that calling to advance the discipline, to push forward the conversation. And maybe if there's one place where I have done that, by God's grace, it would be with the book Authorized, which is not really a scholarly book. It's a popular level book, but it tries to be careful when it comes to linguistics and exegesis and translation. But that's not really a scholarly conversation over the King James only debate. So I made peace many years ago with reading this, that I don't have to be called to advance the discipline. I can still edify the church with my writing. So I draw these fine distinctions because I think they're really important. If you think that you're called to be a scholar, then you're called to something very particular. I remember reading a book, To Change the World by James Davison Hunter, and a really respected friend of mine who's extremely gifted said to me, that's a scholar. And there was this just level of carefulness and exposure to literature, a depth that, I just never reach. And that's okay. I can still be called to a valuable writing and publishing ministry without that. But I want to keep that clearly in mind so that I don't get, in America, we say, too big for my britches. start to get arrogant about what I'm doing, when really I'm serving scholarship and the church. So let me tell you how I view my writing, and I'm kind of betting that a number of you would be in a similar place. I view myself as a popularizer. I think it's my calling to stand in between scholarship and the church and mediate the good things that are happening in whatever area of scholarship I'm working in and reading in, for the benefit of the church. So the main writing work that I've been able to do in the last 3 years has been writing for the Logos Bible software blog and the Bible Study magazine, which is put out by the same company. Faith Life is the overarching company, and I work for that company. And I've been privileged, I've just loved it, to write over 200 articles for them in that time, mostly on the blog, but also in the magazine and in assorted other places. A lot of them have to do with Logos Bible software, and we'll get to talk about that in the next hour. But that's been my major calling, and it's worked well, I think, because the gifting that constitutes calling that I received was popularizer, and the main audience for the Logos blog is pastors and other Bible nerds, people who are teaching the Bible. And what I found was, when I would write what just was natural to me, let's dig into the Bible and let's kind of get nerdy about linguistics and about how it's going to help us interpret the Bible, in Greek and in Hebrew and in English. I would have pastors responding to me saying, this is helpful, this is helpful. And I had people all across the spectrum of the church responding that way, warmly. And I write warmly because I care. I actually love the Lord and his word. And that's what drives me. And I just got, I would say, a consistent response. Yes, this is edifying to us. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not aiming at plaudits, people praising me. Let another man praise you and not your own lips. Yes, but I'm not even aiming for that. I'm aiming for, is this actually building people up? And I found that if that's your gifting and therefore your calling, then your writing is going to edify people. And I hope that's a calling that some of you have. But I'd say, no matter what your age is, no matter what your background is, clearly by being in this program, you're showing that you have an extra level of interest in careful study of scripture and of theology. And it's most likely that men and women, to be honest, with that level of opportunity and education, it's most likely that many of them are called to communicate that to others, and some through writing. I would encourage you, again, fan that gift into flame, because people do need it. What I found is that the internet is the great democratizer. It makes available this megaphone, but that also means that everybody's shouting at the same time. So you're going to look secondarily, not just for that gifting and that calling, but for some kind of platform. And I wanted to talk briefly about what that means, because again, this book comes into play for me. When I first got into blogging, I saw many other bloggers who I would call strivers. And I've never been able to condemn this completely in my mind. I think, marketing and advertising are not inherently bad, but I always wanted my readership to grow because of the quality of what I was giving to them, and not because I ran a gimmicky promotion. It reminds me of my pastor, Mark Minnick, for many years, gently mocking, maybe not so gently this time, the pastors of the 70s in America who would do gimmicky things to get them to come to church. And his classic stock example was this pastor who jumped into a vat full of jelly. And, they advertised this, and all the kids are going to come and laugh as the pastor jumps into a vat full of jelly. I could just never imagine my pastor jumping into a vat full of jelly. There's just no way. Well, I'm not going to do that either. I want, as a writer, I want to build my readership and my platform, such as it is, by actually giving people something, by building them up. And I'm telling you, they will find you. If you regularly give on the internet, on a blog, or if you have an institutional platform that the Lord gives you, like I know several of you are affiliated with BJMBI or C, and I'm getting it mixed up, BJMBC, right, Joel? Yeah. If you have that kind of platform and you're called to give to the church, by all means use it. Or Joel, I know, Dr. Arnold has written regularly for Rooted Thinking, and those pieces almost always find their way to me. Even if I didn't subscribe to the blog, they would find their way to me through social media. Why? Because Joel is giving, and he's giving something of value, and people do recognize it. So although the world is full of people with megaphones shouting, there are few enough people in your circle who are doing that with a level of skill and care that you are now training and have trained to have, that your readers will find you. Just be motivated by the same things that motivate you when you preach. This level of a love for the Lord and a love for his people that gives you a holy fear of saying, "Thus saith the Lord," and gives you care in what you're saying. I want to turn now to, I know we've got break coming up and not too super long, maybe about 12 minutes here, 6:20 a.m. for me. I wanted to talk about academic publishing and book publishing to kind of round this out, and then we'll have some time for discussion or questions. In fact, I think it's appropriate now, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat. But first, academic publishing. I have done the littlest bit of it, and I feel a little embarrassed talking about that because it is so minor. But I have both a tiny number of successes and a slightly larger number of failures that might be instructive for you. The only real success I can point to, I wrote a paper for the Bible Faculty Summit, which, by the way, if you're ever in the U.S., during early August, late July, Bible Faculty Summit is basically the fundamentalist version of ETS. It's much smaller. I happen to run it. It's biblefacultysummit.org, and you can check it out there, get more details. But it's a number of faculty, Bible faculty, and others, because I'm not Bible faculty, but I still get to come, who are basically in the same space, the very narrow slice of the church that is us. And we deliver papers and have Q&A and good fellowship. And I've enjoyed it for so many years that I was left holding the bag, and now I run the thing. I presented a paper on Stanley Fish, who is one of my favorite non-Christian writers, and I wanted to show how his work could be useful for Christians. And I so enjoyed that, but I was nervous. It was my first time I ever presented anything in front of people as smart as they were. And here's these, 25 guys with PhDs, and lowly me at age, I don't know, what was I, 31 or something. I'm going to present this paper before them. So I read it really fast. I kind of raced through it, and still it took, all 45 minutes of my time. And here I am, just with my neck on the chopping block, just quivering, waiting for everybody to hack away. And instead, I got, the first thing somebody said was, "Are you going to publish this?" And that was the encouragement I needed. And I got some good critique too, but that's what I needed to hear. I needed some encouragement. And so I went for it. And I did get it published in the Answers Research Journal, which is from Answers in Genesis. And you can look it up online. That was my one success. I have sent other things to Themelios, and I'm trying to think where else I've sent it. I did get something in Modern Reformation, which is different. That's more popular level. But my failure, which can be instructive, I wrote another paper for the Bible Faculty Summit, sent it off, and some of the reviewers liked it. They had when you send something off to a journal, if they are worth their salt, they have blind peer review, so that the reviewers don't know who has written the article, so they're not swayed theoretically by the reputation of the author, but just by the quality of the argument. And one of the reviewers gave me a thumbs down on my Greek. I confess to being a little uncertain what he was complaining about. I trust he knows better than I do, because he is at the top levels of the academic conversation. And so I've had, yes, a success, but I've had several failures like that too. And all I can do is seek the Lord to see, is this something I should continue trying or not? Right now I'm thinking it's something I'll try at least maybe every 2 years or so, maybe every year if I write something, just see if I can get it published, and work on it if I can. I want to recommend to you, I'm going to find the URL here, and here we go. I'll put it in the comments. A friend of mine, Paul Himes, has a blog, Porekos Bible blog. He teaches at Baptist College of Ministry, which a little bit ironically is kind of King James only, but Paul studied under David Allen Black at Southeastern, and he knows linguistics, and he has done a lot more in the area of publishing than I have, and he's got some articles that I'm going to try to find and send the direct link to, that talk about the different academic journals that are out there, and how you can try to get something into it. It's going to take me a little while. I'll probably find it during the break while I eat my breakfast. He's got really sound advice for that sort of thing. Okay, then turning to book publishing, I actually now work as an academic editor for Lexham Press, which is the publishing arm of Faith Life, makers of Logos Bible software. And I am technically on the acquisitions team, which means I help to acquire manuscripts for for Lexham. And I'm still kind of feeling my way out in that world. My team lead, who's in charge of that, has become a good friend. He's really sharp. He's a conservative evangelical Anglican, and he used to work for Erdman's. He's been in the biz for quite some time, and he's just got a nose for sniffing out good stuff. And I'm trying to learn from him. And I'll tell you what our principles are in general when we come to publish a book. And this is something you just need to be aware of if you ever try to publish with a traditional publisher. And I'll try to make an argument for that in a minute too. We are looking for, first off, good content. We want good writing, and we want people who are edifying the church and ideally advancing the conversation. Those are big. You can do something other than advancing the conversation. If you're popularizing, that's fine too. You just need to be contributing something to your intended audience. Something else that we're looking for is that you have an audience in mind, and we will help writers kind of come up with who is their audience. And then we're looking for somebody who has a platform. And that's the difficult thing nowadays. So I've been in the ironic position, even recently, of talking to my old professors who I happen to know are 38 times smarter than I am. And we're having to tell them, we're not sure that we can publish your manuscript because nobody knows you. And in my case, I just barely squeaked in the door to get authorized, published, because I had a platform at Logos on the blog. That was enough for Lexham to take a risk with me. But the reality is the publisher has to sell books, or it's not going to make enough money to pay for the marketing and the cover design and the typesetting, which is the reason you wanted to go with publishing in a traditional publisher in the first place. So if you don't have any sort of platform, if nobody knows you, If you don't have an online platform or an institutional platform, a publisher is most likely just not going to take the risk, and you're going to be stuck with self-publishing. Yes, it's possible that you'll have a one-hit wonder with self-publishing, and I'm mainly speaking in an American context here. I'm sure that things are different elsewhere in the world, but I can only speak to my context. Self-published books, the implicit message that I get when I see a self-published book is beware, this probably isn't worth your time. That I'm going to state it that bluntly, because it's not always true, but it's true often enough that I usually just won't take the risk. I read books, I choose books based on reputation of the author, things I've already read, and reviews from other people I respect. And those generally also fit what I'm saying. Self-published books usually aren't edited well, have typos and other major problems that make the reading annoying, didn't get the macro level 30,000 foot view edit that could have really helped them, or the micro level edit of grammar and copy editing kind of stuff. They aren't well designed. That also can be an annoyance for readers. They just lack that extra level of responsibility and sharpness. And if you know exceptions, more power to those exceptions. I'm not trying to put anybody down. I'm just relating the way it is nowadays. So Joel got his dissertation published with Paternoster. Is that right, Joel? Yeah. And that's responsible. You know, I don't know exactly what level of editorial they had there, but somebody's looking at it. And he had, of course, professors going over it. I happen to know, I mean, when I went through the publishing process at Lexham as an author, I wasn't an editor. I wasn't working for them yet. And I, as an outsider, was very impressed by their process. The editor, who's now a colleague of mine, Elliot Ritzema, was just excellent. He helped me fix probably 2 significant problems with this little book that I'd written and I was so proud of. And he was perfectly right. And as soon as he made those comments, I just said, yes, that is exactly right. That's what I needed. And he also kind of gave me some confidence about a couple things that I was uncertain about. He was a sounding board for me, even on humor. I wanted to know, did I go overboard? And he said, no, okay, I think this one's okay. And my wife also helped me with that. She's really great about that. A professional cover designer who works for the company designed the cover. I also got encouragement and guidance about how to get endorsements, which are really essential in this publishing context because of what I just said. I'm not going to, there's such a flood of books. How do I possibly choose the right one? I use endorsements. So they were encouraging me to contact so-and-so, contact so-and-so. And the fact that I was not self-publishing, but that I was with a reputable publisher in the evangelical world led those reviewers to give it, you know, a second thought. You're like, okay, maybe I will actually look at this. And so everything about going with a traditional publisher helped me big time. Then they marketed the book. I've got colleagues at work who are all excited about this book and spending time making advertisements for it and sending out emails to our email list. I mean, I'm just so grateful to the Lord for this opportunity to write this little book that I think has been edifying. And I was at a conference recently for pastors representing Lexham Press, and several were coming to me and telling me how the book was useful. And I've just never been more grateful to the Lord and all my writing ministry than at that time to hear that the Lord was using this. I tell this story not at all to put myself forward or puff myself up, but to give an example of really how difficult it is to get all the pieces to align so that you have a book that someone might actually pick up and buy and read. I would encourage you to look for alternative means if traditional publishing is not available to you, but to consider that traditional publishing exists because of needs that writers and readers have. Writers have needs for extra sharpness in their presentation of the material in every way that they usually can't do themselves. And readers have need to have confidence, before they go to the trouble of finding out that their time is going to be well spent. That is the end of my talk on academic writing, why you should do it, what levels of academic writing there are, what level I think I'm called to, and I'm suspecting that others of you might be as well, and then some practical kind of guidance, how it works, at least in an American context, that I hope is helpful for you. With your leave, Joel, I will go eat breakfast, but if anybody has questions during the break time, they can mention them. And Joel, remind me when I should be back in the saddle.
Well, I dare not take you away from your breakfast. No, let's just jump back at like, can we do 10 minutes? How fast do you plan to eat your breakfast?
Perfect.
All right. Okay. And or even 15, I'll chat for a few minutes here about a couple of things. So anyway, enjoy your breakfast. Take your time. Thanks. Good thoughts. Thank you very much. Okay, while he's running out, if you have any other questions here, like you said, let's drop that in the chat, and then when he comes back, we can follow up on that. And then I just want to confirm by email what I sent. The idea next week would be for us to do presentations, and each one of you, we could each take, let's say, between 20 and 30 minutes and present what you have. If you've got stuff that's starting to form up in terms of a text, you could read through that. But anyway, for us to have each person take some time for a presentation, we would be shooting for that for next week. And like we've said, the goal here for this class is to get up to the level of a prospectus, basically that you have a first chapter, you have some of the core research that's been done. So hopefully these writing classes, the initial class of each year, is a lesser load on the lecture side, specifically so that we can use the extra time to pour into the writing side of that. Hopefully you've been able to accumulate some. And then, well, here in Manila, it's a very busy week for us, and you may have a busy week where you're at. But I'm hoping the idea, okay, this gives you a little bit of a deadline or a little bit of something to shoot for to make a sprint and put some serious research in there. So any thoughts or feedback or comments there, again, let me know in the chat. But that's what we'll be planning for next week, and just presenting these topics that you've been working on. And then the following week from that would be split. So I've got a paper that I'm writing right now, and I'll be taking the second, or I don't know, one of the hours, and presenting that paper. And then David Minnick, who just did a dissertation on the theology of Revelation, he'll be presenting for the other hour. So what exactly should the presentation have? Oh, so there's a wide variance there on what you can do. So if you've got something that really is more, it's formed up into a chapter, I would say read it. You can put it up on the screen and we can just walk through, and you can make comments. If this, he mentioned earlier, reading a paper is a little bit more like in a professional professional meeting. The process, somebody just stands up and reads their paper basically, and you can stop and make comments or qualify something, but basically reading your paper. So ideally, I would say that's kind of the ideal thing to shoot for, is if you've got a paper, you read it for us, and any comments as we go or feedback that other people will give you, great. If you're more in the mode of you're researching and reading and things like that, then this could be a time for you to pull some of that together, get it into a more of a summarized format, and then present it that way. Just basically you're sharing with us where you're at up to this point. So does that answer the question? It's still a pretty general answer, I know. But here's one other piece of the puzzle. So we're getting now to the point you're locking in on a topic, and Lord willing, I'm hoping you're hopefully pretty much set in on a topic or close to it. And then, as we said, we're trying to the plan is for this class to finish out your first chapter. That's kind of the final project for this class, is you have your first chapter. The next phase of this would be to start forming up a committee. And so the committee would be reading through each one of the chapters that you submit. And that, by committee, that doesn't mean me. That means we get a group of guys that are going to be focused, or that have some kind of specialty in your area. So guys that are interested in your topic. And I would be looking amongst the guys that have already done classes for us, for the kinds of guys that have lectured for us, and others as well. But probably men that you know from the class already. So that would be the next phase. So as you're thinking of writing this chapter, really that's who you're thinking, okay, if 2 or 3 of those guys that have given us lectures, that's who you're writing for. Those guys, you're planning for them to read through and give their feedback. So, that gives maybe a little bit of, it raises the level of expectation there. You want to give a solid, good scholarship and good work. You're going to have a couple of guys read through and give their feedback. And then as far as this goes, this first chapter is your attempt to sell them on your topic. So, whatever I think about it, or Dr. Oberlin thinks about the topic, that's one thing. But you have a group of guys, that's your committee. So you have to convince the committee. You have to convince the committee that this is a topic worth doing. And that's the point of having a committee, is that you have 2 or 3 guys that are not terribly connected necessarily to your project. They don't have background with your project. It's kind of like the blind review you just mentioned. They sit down, they read it, and then if you effectively sold them, yeah, wow, this is going to be something worth pursuing, and this guy has good thoughts, and he's developing this well. That's what you're selling them on. And so when you get feedback, when I went through the process, I would have times when I would get my chapter back and a guy would say, I don't agree with your argument here. That's okay. That's just the pressure. It's good pressure. It's just kind of get knocked around a little bit. That's good. It's good. It sharpens you. So the process is really good, even if sometimes it can be a little unsettling maybe initially. It's a topic that you care about deeply and you've put a lot of time in, and you really feel like, no, I believe in this argument. Okay, well, he's seeing something. So you got to convince him. That's it. You have to convince. The question here, how long would the first chapter typically be? If I remember right, mine was between 20 and 30 pages. So, the typical Turabian double space kind of thing. So, yeah, somewhere, I would say if you're below 20, it's too short. And if you're getting up around 40 or 50, it's getting too long. So there's a range, and it depends. Some papers don't need a lot of definition of terms because the terms are established. Other papers, I've seen papers where they had to do a bunch of time explaining definition of terms. Previous works, mine was pretty easy. There wasn't much. Brian Collins, there was a ton. So it depends also on your topic. But the idea in each one of these sections, you want to have read broadly enough, read well enough that if there's a major book out there on your topic, you acknowledge it in the previous work section. At least, you give a paragraph or a couple of sentences. So-and-so wrote, but this is why my discussion is different. This is his perspective. This is why I'm doing a different thing. That kind of stuff is what's going on there. Okay, anything else? I want to make sure that we take a break as well. So Dr. Ward went for his breakfast. How about we'll take a 5-minute break? I've got 9:30, or half hour after. So let's just come back at 35, and then we'll pick up there. And then questions for him or questions for me, drop that in the chat. And then we'll be looking forward next week to your presentations. So, okay, we'll continue on in a bit. Thanks. Popularizer is. What a popularizer does and how, and I would just add to the question, maybe give us an example or two of popularizers that you feel like do a great job.
Yeah, great question. Well, I pulled up my dictionary. To popularize is to cause something to be generally liked. But then it gives this more specific definition, which is the one I'm using, to make something that is technical, scientific, or academic accessible or interesting to the general public by presenting it in a readily understandable form. My favorite popularizer, bar none, is John McWhorter. And he's a total atheist, but a nice one. And he showed up. He was willing to read my book, Authorized, which shocked me, and endorse it and show up in my documentary. So I got to meet him in person, and I'm not, I don't care about celebrities, the ones that the rest of American culture cares about, but like to me, that was like meeting a celebrity. I listened to his podcast, Lexicon Valley. He's not a Christian, and so his language occasionally will be inappropriate, but that's rare. And in his books, I don't really remember that happening. He's just really great. I mean, he teaches at Columbia University, top flight American university, and he knows linguistics as an academic should and makes contributions in his field. He's worked on creoles, which is languages that sort of are a mix between two other languages. And so he's got his own kind of scholarly agenda there. But what he's really great at is making academic discussions of linguistics accessible to and interesting to people, lay people, as it were, people who aren't into linguistics. And I'll put his name there, John McWhorter. And a book that I don't know, I kind of don't know where to start with him, but I'm going to link to his book, Words on the Move, Why English Won't and Can't Sit Still, like literally. That's the one that I most recently read and really enjoyed. So when I say I'm a popularizer, usually I'm talking about linguistics also. That's why I like John McWhorter so much. I like to dabble in linguistics, in Greek, and a little bit in Hebrew, and certainly in Bible translation. I'm just always fascinated by those things. And what I found was when I would talk about words and talk about linguistics, I consistently found that people weren't ahead of me, in my readership, that is. There's certainly millions of people who are ahead of me on those topics, but in my readership, I was giving them something that they weren't getting elsewhere. And that, again, is a measure of calling and gifting both at the same time, I think. Great question. Any other questions before I jump into Logos?
So, like, if we're talking about in the theology world, John Piper, good example of a popularizer. I mean, so like his dissertation that's an academic work, but most of his work has been communicating to normal people. He obviously reads broadly and he reads well, but he's communicating it to the average person.
Yeah. Well, John Piper would be a kind of a different kind of popularizer. He's a popularizer of his own academic work, as it were. It's kind of like he doesn't even write out the academic work. He just skips right to the popularizing. So that's definitely one branch of popularizing. The other branch would be the one in which you're not as smart as John Piper, namely me, and therefore you're having to read other people like D.A. Carson, like Stanley Fish, and try to relate what those smart people said to others. And it depends on who your audience is, how your popularizing will go. I mean, there's kind of this general level of the at least somewhat college educated person that I'm kind of aiming at. And then for me, I started to realize I'm also kind of aiming more specifically at pastors and other Bible nerds. So probably we're up into the seminary range. If you're going to be interested in my writing, that's kind of where you're at. With Authorized, I tried to push it down a little further because it's so necessary. In fact, the whole point of the book really was to reach people that the main books weren't reaching. So D.A. Carson and James White is more of well, I guess they're both popularizers, but Carson can do the academic work and the popularizing. He's amazing. White tends to focus more on the popularizing, though he's also got academic chops. But they wrote books on the King James only controversy in 1978. That's Carson. In 1994, I think, or 95, that's White. And they focus entirely on textual criticism. And I realized that in my context in the King James only world, growing up in high school especially, those books, although they were excellent, they were just not accessible to anybody in that church, including the pastor. I'm not trying to put him down. I really am not. He didn't even have a 4-year degree. How is he going to follow all this complicated talk about textual criticism, no matter how expertly it's communicated? And it was. I realized we need to have an argument that's accessible to people. So I focus only on English. I spend 1-page spread explaining why I'm not going to talk about textual criticism, and the whole rest of the book is focused on something that should be accessible to everybody who reads the King James Version. So I'm really driven by this desire to popularize.
And there's a way to do this even like with commentaries. I'm sorry, J.D. Crowley, he did some work where he took, I think it was, I forget whose commentary, but he took, maybe Carson, took a solid commentary and it was on Romans, and then he just simplified it down and made it available to people in his context. I think it ended up being translated as well for his context. I mean, that's a form of it, right? Because the people in his context are not going to pick up the high-level commentary on Romans. But anyway, he's going to do that for you. He's going to bring in the best insights. So a lot of
and that's a great example. And a popularizer is going to be really careful about use of Greek and Hebrew. So I use no Greek and no Hebrew in a book about Bible translation. That's a challenge. And it's kind of tempting to pull rank by using Greek and Hebrew in a context like that, to kind of subtly say to your audience, or not so subtly, hey, I know what I'm talking about, and you ought to just trust me because I know more than you. And I didn't want to argue in that style. I wanted to argue in a style that, as much as was humanly possible, made it possible for the average person to follow the argument on their own. And I believe I'm seeing some success there. I'm not certain. I mostly seem to be hearing from pastors who've read the book, not from lay people. So we will see. But yeah, that's a really great question. Okay, another one. How or when would you know if you've succeeded in being popular? Haha. So let's draw a really careful distinction here between being popular and being a popularizer. There's a difference between somebody who is seeking approbation from the people. Populace is just Latin for people. And somebody who is giving gifts to the people. And that's what I see a popularizer as. Someone who loves the topic so much, and in this case, why shouldn't we? It's the Word of God. And we love the people so much that we're willing to translate that topic into something the people we love can access. And if you're asking, how do I know if I've gotten at the right level? Well, that also I would appeal to the mysterious category of gifting and calling. But then you can also, what I do when I write, I often will read to my wife at night, and she's got good education herself, and so isn't fully representative of the people. But I feel like she's in exactly the right place to be a help to me, because she does not live in that academic world. She lives in a homeschooling world for 3 children, 9, 7, and 4, and the mommy world. And so she recognizes when I'm not really making good sense in that world. So if you have a good wife who's given to you as a help, or a child who is a reader, like I'm looking forward to the time that'll come, I think pretty soon, when my 9-year-old can read something I've written for kids and tell me what doesn't make sense. Andy Naselli, who's a mutual friend of mine and Joel's, he sends out, and this is a great comment from Phil. I feel like a good teacher, especially to undergrads, is a type of popularizer. Yes, totally. I 1000% agree with that. That's actually one of the things that has led me not to teach in undergrad is I feel like that's a special level of popularizing that's required, and requires extra energy from me that I don't always have. It's actually easier for me to talk on a grad school level than to talk on that undergrad level. But if that's your calling and gifting, then you're already set up to write that way. Andy Naselli, I expected him to write at the top levels of academic scholarship, and I think he has that capacity, but he has reached out. Most of his work has been for the church. And yeah, I agree with Kenneth too. A popularizer is defined by his audience. And your culture, whatever it is going to have a middle class of some kind, educated people who can buy and read books. Gauging that audience, trying to understand them is your way forward. Back to Andy. Andy's written a lot for the church, and I really appreciate that. And something he does every time he writes, pretty much anything, is he sends it out to like dozens of people. At least I thought it was dozens. And I'm a close enough friend of his that I kept pestering him over the years, like, Andy, you keep sending out Word documents to these dozens of your friends, and he'd blind copy them on an email. And I was one of those friends, and I would often, but not always, depending if I had time, look over whatever he sent, an article or a book. And he was incorporating feedback from people, which is very humble of him. But I said, you should use Google Docs so you can just share it with everybody at once, and then you don't have to deal with, dozens of different Word documents. Well, so he took my advice finally, and then he got marked as a spammer because he was sending it to like 200 people. I didn't know he was sending it to that many people. Now, he doesn't expect everybody to get back to him, but one of the things a writer can do and should do is have a network of people he can call on to evaluate his writing before it kind of gets to the official editorial stage. So every time I pick up a book, I always read the acknowledgments, and it never fails. If the book is good, there are people that the writer is thanking. And I wade through lists of names I don't know because I'm looking for a tidbit. And I almost always find something interesting to me. And Andy's experience has now become mine. I sent out my book while it was in manuscript to a bunch of people, including people I disagreed with, and I knew disagreed. I sent it to King James Only Bible College professors, and the comments I got were fascinating and very useful for me. So even if you're just writing an article, by all means, pass it to several people. You want to spend your points there carefully. Like, if I did that all the time, I would wear everyone completely out. So my personal blog, I don't really bother with that. My Logos blog, only occasionally would I send that out to somebody else because I had a trusted editor, still do. But a book, yeah, I sent it out to lots of people. I didn't figure they'd all get back to me, but I'm looking for their help to make sure that I'm hitting the mark of popularization.
It's helpful. I heard, this is really out there, but I heard about a guy, the way he wrote his book, he had a whole bunch of topics he thought about discussing, and he put them into tweets, and then he was watching to see which things kind of grabbed traction, and those became the pieces that he incorporated into his book. And the book was good. It was very good. It wasn't just anyway, it was solid content, but it's kind of a fascinating out-of-the-box way to do it. I want to use... I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
No, I was going to shift the conversation, so let's hear what you're going to say.
You shift. I was asking you to shift.
All right, let's jump to Logos. Yeah, we want to make sure we get there. So.
Okay, so I can share my screen, right? Let's see here. Yes. I will share desktop one. Okay, can everybody see my screen now in Logos?
Yes, we're there.
Okay, I just realized I need to bump up the content scaling and the program scaling so everybody can see. I usually put it at 140%. Okay, I just left Logos up the way I had it when I was most recently using it. And I've got a couple things open. Bibles, I'm often copying Bible passages, and I'll often use the Logos tool for that. And I got the Lexham Survey of Theology, which was my big project in 2018. I was one of the general editors for it, and we had major contributors, including one of Joel and my mutual good friends, Brian Collins, who's also lectured for you all, and John Frame, who's my favorite theologian, Fred Sanders, who I got to meet through this, and he's really, really sharp. Some other names you might possibly recognize. And we did a map of all of systematic theology, and every one of these nodes on the map, and all the 8 major loci and all the subdisciplines, every one of these nodes has an article written on it that introduces that topic and then links you out to, let's just pick a random one here. In fact, I will, here we go. I did this one. God's titles. It's part of the doctrine of God and the divine names. Have a definition, then a description, and key verses, and then places in systematic theologies where you can go read about what they have to say for yourself. That is, I bring this one up, not just because I worked on it and am still excited about it, but because it's a good example of what Logos can do. Logos is an electronic library. And if you want to ask, why is it that Logos is so expensive, then that's kind of the wrong question. You need to ask, why is it that books are so expensive? I actually would not call Logos expensive, because what you're getting with it is a massive number of books. If you buy a base package, which is the way that most people get into Logos, that's what I did. I just didn't go out to restaurants while I was in grad school, and that gave me the money to get Logos Gold and later Logos Platinum. What am I buying with all that? I'm buying books. I always tell people, make sure that you have a knowledge of those books before you buy. It doesn't mean you have to read them all before you buy. Naturally, that's why you're buying them. But you want to have some understanding of what you're getting. And when you go to the Logos homepage, let me search for the gold package, for example. You will see, let me go to view all base packages. Logos 8 is the most recent version. I think I got in at Logos 3 or 4 years ago. All these different packages just have different books in them, and slightly different feature sets, but basically all the ones that are worth having have the same feature set. And you're getting whole commentary sets. Here's the New American Commentary and the Pillar Commentary set. All of Spurgeon's sermons, for example, lots of Bibles, lots of other commentaries, including, here's one that has been pretty popular recently. The Lexham Geographic Commentary on the Gospels was selling out really well at a conference I was just at. The Bible Speaks Today, which I really enjoy. John Stott is a great preacher, and his commentaries I've often found useful for preaching. I go to them kind of last usually, but sometimes for interpretation too. This is a favorite of mine, Bruce Waltke on the Psalms. I've really enjoyed the structure there because James Houston talks about the history of reception of the Psalms before you get into the exegetical technical commentary proper. Bible dictionaries and encyclopedias, Old and New Testament studies, theological dictionaries, general biblical studies, devotionals and spiritual growth. I mean, we've got in every one of the base packages all kinds of stuff. Original language tools, journals like Themelios, which you can actually get free now. If you go through the Themelios site, you can get them all free in Logos. What you're buying when you buy Logos is books. The reason, however, that you're not, that we're adding more value, and it's not just like Amazon Kindle where you get a bunch of books and they're kind of all existing separately. You can search them individually, but not together. What you're also getting with Logos is a bunch of search tools and other kinds of random tools that you need in biblical studies. Can I just get some kind of indication in the chat as to how many people have, or maybe you could step in, Joel, and tell me what's the Greek and Hebrew exposure like for students in the program?
Yeah, I think all of us would use Greek and Hebrew.
Okay.
Yeah, all of us would.
So you're prime candidates for using Logos Bible software because a lot of the tools are focused on exactly that, use of Greek and Hebrew. I mean, down to the simplest little things like whenever I need to transliterate, if I have a passage of any length at all, I can just copy and paste it right into the text converter tool, and it automatically transliterates it for me. People ask, why should I get Logos when there is word search and quick verse and YouVersion? And I say, if you have studied Greek and Hebrew, you're going to want the tools in a top-level Bible software program. Now, I'm an employee of Faith Life, makers of Logos Bible software, but right now I'm sitting in my private home, so I can say Accordance and BibleWorks are great too, and I happen to know that Joel has used Accordance for many years, although I also happen to know that Joel has come to appreciate Logos more over that time. I also have Accordance and BibleWorks on my computer right now. I don't tend to use Accordance for very much because BibleWorks tends to do those things for me that Accordance can do well. There's a couple little things that BibleWorks does that I still like. For example, let's see here, 1 John 5:7. I have it comparing the critical text and the Textus Receptus for me, and it's just a little bit easier for me to go a verse at a time than in Logos. That's the one thing maybe one or two things I'm still using BibleWorks for. But for everything else, I'm in Logos, and I'm doing original language study. I'm reading books. I'm searching books. It's just my continual workhorse all of the time. Let me show you how I study a passage in Logos to kind of show off some of the things that it can do. So we were in Ephesians 4. If I run a passage guide on Ephesians 4, think of Logos. I've been saying this for so many years, and it's just gotten more and more true. Think of Logos as an information filter. Everybody in this world who has a smartphone is overwhelmed with information. And I've been reading a book called Technopoly. I'll pull it up here because it really is helpful. It's like amazing. It was written in the early 90s by Neil Postman. And I know that your esteemed instructor, Joel, is somewhat skeptical of the field of media ecology, but I dare say Joel would also find a lot to value in this book, Technopoly, The Surrender of Culture to Technology. In this book, he is well aware of the upsides and the downsides of technology. And one of the big things he keeps talking about is the overwhelming amount of information that comes our way. You are an information filter for those you teach. You are taking in more information than you're giving them. You're taking in exegetical information from Greek and Hebrew, interpretive information from commentaries, and other kind of edifying information from other books that you read, sermons and lectures that you listen to. You're not giving it all to the people. You are filtering it for them, whether they're students or parishioners in a church. Logos is an information filter for you because you can, in my library alone, which is actually not as big as a lot of the libraries of our users. I mean, we have users who have massive libraries. I only have the platinum. I basically got up to standard platinum and reformed platinum. That's how high I've gotten. And I still buy books from Logos. I get a little discount, but I still have to spend my own money. So I'm careful with that. And I have, even in my kind of medium-sized library, I have way more books than I can ever get through. Why do I have them all? Well, because the search tools enable me to target the best books and find the best stuff. And the passage guide is a good example. So I have my commentaries kind of ranked, And that doesn't mean that this will be a technical rank of every single book, but basically the best sets are at the top. So if I run a passage guide for Ephesians, NICNT is at the top. I've got that. Oh, that's the previous NICNT. This is funny. Sometimes I run across books I didn't know I had. I didn't realize I had that older version of NICNT Ephesians. I like Calvin. I like to read Calvin's commentaries. It's on there. I enjoy O'Brien, and his books got pulled. That's a long story. You can go into another time, but I still enjoy his commentaries. Andrew Lincoln and Word. I enjoy the Tyndale series, especially in the Old Testament. I also enjoy Bible Speaks Today, especially John Stott. I've got N.T. Wright in there. I've got the ACCS, which is the Ancient Christian Commentary on Scripture. And what I'll do when I'm studying a passage is I'll just go through and click all the links. And it's opening up all of these commentaries to whatever passage I placed in there. Now, in the olden days, before Logos, I had physical commentaries. I still do. They're back on the shelf. I can't remember the last time I touched one of my physical commentaries. Boy, I just don't have the opportunity. And I would maybe check 3 if I had 3 on a given book and if I were being extra diligent. But in Logos, I'm regularly checking 10 and even 20. And occasionally I'll check like 60 or 80 because what commentaries have taken on a new function for me. Instead of me working through the argument with somebody in that commentary, which I can still do if I need to, and occasionally I do, instead I'm taking what's called a plebiscite or a referendum. I'm just taking a vote. I want to see, I've already worked through this passage first. I'm sure you've been told that. That's what you do first. And then afterwards, I want to get the comments of others. And I've raised questions in my own study that I want the commentators to answer. So I will zero in on whatever issues, interpretive questions I've come across. And I just want to see, what did the commentators say? So for example, Ephesians 4, actually, I should have gone to 11 and 12. Let me just pull that up here. Pastors and teachers. Some people have said, like I was actually at the Shepherd's Conference, John MacArthur's church. I was representing Lexham Press 2 or 3 weeks ago. And on the sign, he's called the pastor teacher. Are the pastors and teachers the same thing? That's an interpretive question. I'm going to survey, what do all of these commentators have to say about that? And I'm just going to click through tab by tab. I find that highly useful. And here's the basic principle. I find that books that I read from cover to cover, right now, I don't tend to use them in Logos. That does happen. I have read books cover to cover. Those I'm actually usually reading on Kindle for various reasons. That's easiest for me. One of the biggest ones is that whenever I highlight something on the Kindle, it automatically saves it into a highlight file. And so I have a whole page on the internet full of highlights. Let me get my little code to log in here. And I'll show you that. Just a second. Okay, 235095. I'm showing you this because Logos also does it. But here are all the things I've highlighted in Technopoly. I'm reading a great book by Robert Alter on the art of Bible translation. I'm reading Darwin Duvall's. I'm reading another book on media ecology for a talk I'm giving. It's just so incredibly valuable to me that rather than highlighting in a paper book where if I want to recover those quotations, I'll have to go type them out. Instead, I've got them all right here. I put them right now in an app called Ulysses. I was doing my notes in it too for the talk today. Logos can do the same thing, and it does do the same thing. But the principle is, if I'm reading from cover to cover, I like the form factor of the e-ink Kindle. But if I'm using a reference work, so that would be commentaries and dictionaries, encyclopedias, and Bible texts. Things that, for my given purposes at the moment, I'm not going to read page after page after page. Instead, I'm looking for precise bits of information. Then I want Logos. It's just set up so well for me to be able to refer to information. A minute ago, I highlighted some text with my cursor, and then I just pressed the letter Y to make it yellow, highlighted. It has multiple tools like this for reading and for saving notes. It's got incredible search tools so that if I want to search within a given book, I can just hit Command F. I've got a Mac, Control F in Windows, and easily be searching that book by itself. If I want to search all my books, I can do that too. My stock example for that is C.S. Lewis. I love C.S. Lewis. It's my lifetime goal to read everything he ever wrote that's been published. And Walter Hooper, his literary executor, has been a great help toward that end. He's got a lot of stuff out there. And I'm always reading Lewis. I kind of go through binges of Lewis, really. I'm always thinking about Lewis. I have Lewis in Kindle. I've got him in my app because for a while there, for whatever reason, HarperCollins, who now owns the rights to Lewis's works in the US, with some exceptions, I think, they were putting out his titles for like $1.99 or $2.99, and they did this for like a year or more. Maybe they're still doing it. And I bought a bunch of them. You can see them all here. But here's the problem I found. I've got his collected letters. I've got the Narnia series. I've got his essays on various topics. I've got biographies of him that quote him, of course. I love the Space Trilogy, especially Perelandra. That's one of my favorite books ever, The Great Divorce. Problem with Lewis is, I think it was his friend Owen Barfield said, everything Lewis thought about anything was contained in what he said about anything. I got that a little mixed up, but let's see. What Lewis thought about everything was contained in what he said about anything, something like that. Which means that there are ideas in The Last Battle that show up in Mere Christianity and in the Space Trilogy. And I can sometimes have the hardest time thinking, where in the world did Lewis say this thing that I know he said, and I want to find it because I want to cite it for some article or sermon or what have you. So in Kindle, which I'm in right now, you can only search one book at a time. I can open up The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I can search it. And it's fast, that's nice, that's great, but if that quote is not in that book, I'm out of luck. Whereas in Logos, I can open up a search bar and actually, don't tell, but I use Verbum, the Catholic version of it, to house my work library, and I use Logos to house my personal library. And I have Lewis in Verbum, so I'm going to pull him up. I can actually search all of my C.S. Lewis books at once in Logos Bible software. It's taking its time to come up, so I'll have to wait for that. But you can build collections to search anything. You can narrow your search and expand your search. It all goes back to the idea of information filters. Logos, I like to picture it like this. You've got these shelf after shelf after shelf full of great books. Yeah, are there books in there that you're not going to use? Sure. I have books on my shelves that I bought that I'm never going to use. When I bought them, I didn't know that, but when I die, some of them are going to lose out. I've never really cracked them open. Same with Logos, no sweat. But imagine all these shelves full of books, and I've got this robot arm that I can give instructions to, and it goes up and down the shelves and grabs books for me and puts them on my desk and opens them up to the page that I need. It's really just highly, highly valuable. That robot arm is an information filter. It's taking all the stuff that I've already filtered in some way because I bought it. I didn't buy The Jesus Calling by Sarah Young or any Joel Osteen books or Deepak Chopra or Oprah. I bought these books, so that's already an information filter, but that is so much information I can't handle it all. I need Logos to cast an even narrower net to find for me exactly what I want. And when you run a passage guide, it's not only giving you links to your commentaries, but also to journals if they happen to discuss that passage, to parallel passages in Pauline letters, to cross-references, which of course you'd expect. Another feature that I really like is down here too, and I'll get to it in a bit, biblical people, things, and events. The whole Bible is tagged for figurative language. It's just got an overwhelming number of tools for somebody, especially who is preaching and teaching the Bible. And I want to take questions in just a little bit, but let me give you another example of something I like to do. Okay, I was the other day, I can't even remember why, I needed to find a verse where God was spoken of as a rock. I'm going to close down all my tabs here and start afresh. Okay, so I open up my English Bible, and I know there's this passage where God is a rock. I'm going to open up a search window too, and if I search the Bible, all passages in the ESV for rock, I'm going to find 146 results in 133 verses. That is a net that is cast too broadly. This fuzzy search up here can often find things for me. It's just kind of guessing like Google does as to what I want to find. But rock is not enough for it to go on. I can skim this and see if I can find examples of where God is a rock. And sure enough, I find one. But with that many examples, I'm going to miss something, or I'm just going to be overwhelmed. So here's what I can do. I can type rock intersects person. Oops, I'm actually going to start that over. God, if I type in God and I click the drop down, look what happens. Person God. Okay? So now I'm not just searching for a form, that is G-O-D. I'm searching for the thing, the person, however he is named. If I do rock, person God intersects rock. Here are all the places where God is referred to as a rock. That's a much more manageable 19 results in 19 verses. An amazing thing you can do with Logos is search for meaning and not just form. And I'm doing this regularly. So I was working on Adam and Eve, and I searched for person Eve just by herself. And of course, Genesis 2 and 3 come up a bunch. But here's something else that comes up that a regular search for Eve would not have come up with. Genesis 5:2, male and female, he created them. And then especially 1 Timothy 2:14, Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Okay? Eve is referred to as the woman. If I search for Eve, I'm not going to find that. But if I search for the meaning, the referent person Eve, I'm going to come up with all the places where she's mentioned. We've got the Bible tagged here at Logos in all kinds of neat ways. Let me Zoom thing is getting in my way. How do I get that out of here? Let me just try this. Okay. Pull up the Greek New Testament. If I go to Matthew 5, presuming everyone is tracking with me in Greek here, at least most people, you are the salt of the earth. And Jesus also says, you are the light of the world. If I right-click any word in the Bible text, Logos will show me all the ways in which it's tagged. It's tagged not only for its lemma, that is the dictionary form, also for its root, which happens in this case to be the same, that isn't always, of course, its parsing, its Lohnidah number, where does it fit in the semantic domains? It's tagged for the whole passage, the event that's going on in the passage. It's tagged for the speaker, so I can search just within the things that Jesus has said. It's tagged for the addressee who's being spoken to. It's tagged for the preaching themes that are related to it. It's tagged for, it's always lovely to get messages while you're presenting. Sorry about that. It's tagged for a metaphor. And here's the one I wanted to show you. we have a figurative language data set, smart people that you might possibly know. One of them is Michael Aubrey, who is a big-time Greek nerd, runs a blog on that I've actually subscribed to for many years before I ever thought I'd get to meet him and work with him. They tagged the entire New Testament for figurative language. So here's a case where light is used as a metaphor for believers. I can search for all the places where light is used as a metaphor in the New Testament. I can get more specific, and by clicking on by clicking on light as believers, I can look for just the places where light is used as a metaphor for believers. You are the light of the world. And then we've got Romans 2. If you think that you're a light to those who are in darkness, Ephesians 5. At one time you were darkness, now you are light in the Lord. Here are the 3 passages where light is used as a metaphor for believers. Why is this valuable? Because what you're frequently doing in Bible study and teaching is trying to find parallels that elucidate the passage that you're in. Usage determines meaning, and that's true not just on the level of lexemes, words. It's true on the level of metaphors. If you can find a metaphor that's used several times, although you want to be careful not to read one author inappropriately back into another one, nonetheless, the Bible also has a divine author, and you can pick up something by checking out all the times where a given metaphor is used. I'm going to stop there for now and pull back up my Zoom window so I can see the chat. All right, let me just pull up the chat window. I want to make sure that I get any questions from you all on Logos Bible software. So we've got 12 minutes left. Any questions on Logos?
I appreciate so what you focused on there, because passing comment here, the stuff that Logos has baked in like this, all of this tagging for by topic, by event, by person, that has to be done by humans, right? There's
Right.
no way you can automate any of this. It just has to be manually done. And Logos is really, it's the only database that has that because it's been
Right.
done by sheer elbow grease, by just human time, eyeballs sitting there going over the text and clicking away. And that's a really, really competitive formula there. I mean, that's kind of, in my mind, the crown jewels a little bit of Logos, that nobody else has this. And there's no way to do it except to go through manually.
And it's really difficult to explain the value of that until you've tried it and used it. And on the surface, this doesn't look any different from any other Bible software. This is the Greek New Testament. Here's the English Standard Version. Why do I have to pay money for this? It's actually available freely online. Actually, both of these are. But underneath, under the hood, there's all this tagging. And let me just mention to my wife that she needs to stop messaging me financial stuff.
I have this problem quite often when I'm teaching. I teach off my iPad and I'll get messages in, so then my students are in on, whatever.
Okay, so under the hood, there's all this added value. And again, I feel a little defensive for people who think that Logos is too expensive, because I know the people who had to be paid salaries to sit there and do this day in and day out and day in and day out. The money that Logos as a company earns, back when Logos was our only product, this was especially true, but it just gets fed back into the company by paying people to do work that ends up making better software. And we're always improving it. We're now working, of course, on the next version of Logos. And even within the company, we don't know right now, what all that's going to entail. It's a pretty exciting place to work. Any other questions? That's a great comment, Joel.
The theology guide that you showed, to me, that's maybe the most compelling. There's a lot of compelling reasons to do Logos 8, but that's a very compelling reason to do Logos 8. That's good. It's good content. And to me, the way to use that is, like I was preparing something for a class for the already not yet. It just gave me a quick place to go. Gave me here's 5 or 6 resources that I can go to. Here's some references that I ought to include. I didn't have a lot of time, and so it saved me some time, and it gave me a starting point. I clicked out already not yet, had a quick read, a couple of passages to start with, and there I go. It's a good resource. It's very, very helpful.
I did exactly the same thing just the other day with this resource. I know the contributors were solid, and I just need something quick. In my case, I wanted to see, the key verses for a given topic. And as time passes, we are tagging more and more systematic theologies to, so for any one of these topics, let me go to something a little more, okay, Jesus as second Adam. Let's see how many we got there. Yeah, so you can go right to given systematics and in the whole page range in which that topic is discussed, is linked to. And that's just really valuable. I mean, the Bible reference system we take for granted. It brings us to individual addresses in Scripture. We're working on basically making something similar for systematic theologies. Logos has always been about Bible study, but now we are adding significant tools for theological study. I've already invested quite a bit in another software. Is there something like a crossover price? Kenneth, do you mind telling me what software you invested in? Was it Accordance or BibleWorks or WordSearch or? Olive Tree. Yeah. Okay. Olive Tree, in fact, I'm just about to see them and Accordance. Okay. I'm just about to see Olive Tree at a conference that Logos puts on. And it seems to me like they are doing more and more as time passes at Olive Tree. And so there are many good pieces of Bible software out there to have. Unfortunately, no, there's no crossover for Olive Tree or Accordance. There is for BibleWorks. Now the BibleWorks is shut down. We had put together a package. Actually, the very morning that it happened, I dropped everything and was scrambling along with a bunch of other people in the company to respond to this. This in the past year, this happened. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's kind of a misconception. You can buy books from a brick and mortar bookstore. You can buy them from the Kindle store. You can buy them from the Logos store. Every one of these booksellers, including us, is paying money to the publishers. But the publishers aren't keeping track of, who spent money where. They're the ones who would have to give credit if they wanted to do so. So if you've already invested in another piece of software, well, maybe there are some things you could do in Logos Basic, which is free. Should be, let me just put the link in there. logos.com/basic. You can get that for free, and then just get the free book of the month. Make sure that you're on that track. And maybe there'll be some things that you end up doing in Logos that you can't do in Olive Tree. And maybe along will come somebody who wants to give you a nice big parting gift as you leave a ministry or something, and you can ask for a Logos package. Oh, and you do also have Logos 7. Okay, well, boy, you're well provided for. You have one that I don't have, because I do have BibleWorks in Accordance, but I don't have Olive Tree. Yeah, okay, all you have is the basic. Yeah, for you guys, if you're going to use Logos and really enjoy it, you are going to want to have at least the gold package. If you know Greek and Hebrew, you want the gold or the platinum. You're not really going to feel the full use of the software until those bookshelves are full of good books. That robot arm that goes around and finds the books for you is only so valuable when there aren't that many good books on the shelf. That's what I'd say. Any other questions?
I'll toss in a thing here. As far as platforms go, now Olive Tree is definitely more limited on the searchability and some of the features and things like that. What do you say? If you kind of if you jump around between platforms too much, then you end up getting you end up getting frustrated. So at some point, it might be a good idea to kind of, okay, this is where I'm going to go. The thing that is so impossible is none of us know where things go in the long term. So it was less clear 10 years ago between like BibleWorks and Logos. And over time, well, now we know, I mean, BibleWorks doesn't exist. So that's the hard thing. And so you can invest in something and 5 years later that platform might not be where you want to be. Um, yeah, so it's hard.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that a little bit. Logos is a business, not a ministry. And that's something that my supervisor, when I first came on, like kept saying to me over and over. And I was kind of wondering, why does he keep saying that to me? I know this. But I think he saw I have a ministry heart. And that's what attracted me to Logos, was actually that I could do ministry there. And I just needed to remember that there was a bottom line. And I've been able to write in such a way that I don't think I just became a shill, that is somebody who will say whatever he needs to say in order to make a buck for the company or for himself. I think my readers can tell I actually believe the Bible and love to write about it and love Logos. And so it comes from a genuine place in my heart when I do all those things. But I've seen the value of running a business like a business rather than like a ministry. And that's it. If you want this to be around in 5, 10, 20, 30 years, nothing is a sure bet. Nothing. Nothing in this world is a sure bet, including your own life. But what's the surest bet I can have? It's a company run on principles that will establish its long-term viability. And that is what Logos is. And we have been successful, and you've seen, the users have seen, we listen to them and we pour that money back into making better software. So I think there are several great platforms out there. I really do. I use them. But if you're looking for the safest bet, humanly speaking, something is going to last, I think Logos is it. Any other questions, comments?
It's good. Anyone else has a comment? And we got, another minute. So if you have a question, drop it in there.
Well, thanks everybody. Joel gave me an update on where everybody is, and I've known of some of you, like Phil, for years and years. I sat near you in church at some point when you were visiting Mount Calvary, or at Mount Calvary years ago. Of course, I know Ping. I got to see Ping not too long ago. And others of you that I don't know personally, I'd love to get to know you at some point. I'm actually traveling to Singapore next May, like in 2020, to speak for a online friend, a church that he has there. And I'd love to meet anybody who's in that area. I'm really appreciative of what the Lord is doing in your lives and what the Lord has allowed Joel to do for and with you in this ministry. So may God bless you, and may you be better servants of the word because of this time than you were before.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Very much appreciative. So, okay, well then we will, we'll close out the class time, and just want to thank you very much again for your willingness to generously give your time, and hope that you have a good day without being too sleepy the rest of the day. So thanks for the early morning. Okay, to all others, have a great evening. We'll see you next time. Thank you.